Okay, so today one of the things or topics that we're going to talk about is some of the challenges that we've had in our lives. So the question is just for all of us to think of a challenge in our life and how we've overcome it.
I think I was so naive to compare to the girls these days when they get married. I just wasn't clued up. And then to wake up suddenly and then you're in a different household. That was like a major shock. I didn't imagine it to be like that. I was in someone else's house. It wasn't my own. And even though your husband says it's your own house, it's never your own home. I don't know what your experience is. I never classed that as my home, even though my husband would say it's your home as much as everyone else's. You know, we're all going to live here. It never felt my own house. So I found that a really hard challenge in my life. Just being accepting a different role and becoming married and being a daughter-in-law and then being a wife as well. Anyone else had any experiences similar to that, or was I the only one? You've all gone quiet.
I was really blown away with I didn't expect that. I think that's okay. I just, in terms of not your story, but just the way in which you spoke about that so openly, and it's really actually was really touching hearing you say that, because it made me reflect on my own experience and how I remember now I felt exactly the same way when I woke up the day after, and I was like, hang on, where am I? And I remember the first time I'd been to Herbie's house before, my husband's house before, but yeah. After marriage, as soon as my side of the family left, something in me just kind of shifted, and I just felt a surge of emotion. I looked around me and I just saw strangers, and these strangers were supposed to be my new family immediately. You know, and Herbie and me went out for a walk, which I wasn't supposed to do because the daughter-in-law is not supposed to leave the house for a certain amount of time after marriage or something. I don't know.
Yes, I remember that ritual.
But Herbie rejected that instantly, which gave me a lot of confidence immediately. He was like, oh no, we're just going out now, I'm going to walk the dog. And Mum just didn't say anything. And then we just went, and I was very emotional and all of that. So yeah, what you said resonates with me a lot. The challenge of feeling this pressure to have to accept this family who are literally strangers, pretty much, accept them as your own, and that expectation and what that creates. Because I feel like sometimes we always end up measuring our relationships against that expectation. You know, the expectation that this has to be like your mum, this has to be like your sister. You know, and that you're always going to fall short from that, then, aren't you? Because how can that relationship build overnight? It's impossible.
No. And I remember, I don't know about you, Darshan, that I couldn't call my mother-in-law mum for a good while. And even then, after about, I suppose, a month or so, then I started to call her mum, but I didn't feel it. I think I only did it because I think she was upstairs at one point, and I was like, I can't call her Auntie G. I can't call her Auntie. So how am I going to call her? I can't call her by her name. And then I was like, how am I going to say this? And I remember saying, Mom, like this. And I was like, oh no. But it just felt like I just felt as if I had to really have a forced calling her Mom, because, you know, being Auntie, she's not my mom. I wasn't brought up with her being my mom. But I just remember now that moment of actually having to call her from upstairs and shouting Mom. I was like, what am I going to call her? I can't call her Auntie G. So that took me a while.
That's so true what you say about that, because I think it was hard. So obviously, I lost my dad before I got married. So when I got married, calling my husband's dad was really hard, because I felt like I was abandoning my own father, even though he wasn't alive. So it's a very it sounds like a very similar kind of thing where you got so used to calling your own parents mum and dad, and now suddenly you don't even know them very well, and you're expected to just transition to that straight away. So it's that's very relatable.
And how did you make the transition for yourself, Harmeet?
I think I just knew I had to. I mean, there's what it's like you said. What else can you call them?
Yeah.
And I think it was obviously a little bit different because obviously I hadn't called anybody dad for a long time, and now suddenly. But then at the same time, I tried to embrace it because I felt like now I've gained a dad. I've gained that relationship again. So I tried to see it in a positive light as well. And I think that made it easier. So rather than thinking, oh, I don't have, seeing it from the other point of view that actually I'm gaining something. And I've been given that blessing that I've got someone now to call dad again.
I like that. I really like that. I wish I had the mindset for that actually sometimes, because as you was talking, Suki, about getting married over 18 years ago and some of the things that you had to overcome. I got married 7 years ago, and it sounds, like, especially the struggles of just the roles and even naivety and what I expected it to be like as opposed to what it really was like. And I really, really struggled. And I look back and I think I probably was depressed actually. Soon after, and that's no fault of anyone's, but probably my own expectations, and just adjusting to. It's just bizarre, isn't it, waking up in a new house and having all these new people around who are getting on with their life, and you're thinking something major has just happened. Can we slow down? Can we just stop and make sense of this? But obviously, people don't do that. That's not the norm. But it was I still think I'm a bit of a feminist. So I really struggled against the whole kind of gender roles. I think that the older generation generally do tend to have like ideas about what men and women do. And for me, like, I feel like the first couple of years was all about like fighting against this, but this is who I am. And I think I don't think that's changed actually for most people. I think some people that that is different. But time, I'd say, for me really made a difference, because I suppose people get to know you, and it isn't just about like your role as a wife or a daughter-in-law or even a mother. It's about like you as a person without those kind of that job, that role, so it's just about Gobindajit. Like, what kind of person are you? Oh, you don't like being told what to do? Noted. I wish it was noted by my husband. No. But yeah, it's just about like people, like we know our siblings, like we know our parents, like no matter what happens, even if we have an argument, underneath all of that they really care for you. And I think that's what, obviously 7 years on, I am starting to realize about my husband's family, that they do care. But at the beginning, I think it's much harder to hold that in mind when things happen, because obviously like you're new into the family and they're new to you, so it's an adjustment for everyone. And I think especially for men, I didn't think of this at the time. It's only as kind of marriage has gone on really about adjusting to the needs of your new wife and to your family, and how you kind of are the middleman and hold all of that. I think that is a really hard job. I don't know how. I mean, it'd be good to get a male perspective on this maybe one day. But I've thought about that a lot more now than I could probably. I didn't have the space or capacity to think about that early on, though.
A couple of things come up for me when I'm thinking about marriage and getting married. So I was very much brought up in a traditional way of this is your temporary home, we're your temporary parents, and they're going to be your real parents. And thinking back, that can actually be a little bit traumatic, because you don't know where you're going to be, and then once you do get there, you realize, actually, are they my real parents? Because they don't feel like my real parents. And one thing that I found was, even though I used to have this motto, which is quite tragic, which is, if you expect the worst, you won't be disappointed. So I remember a cousin of mine asking me when I got engaged to my husband, how is he, what's he like, and all of that. And I was like, yeah, he seems okay, but actually I don't have huge expectations. And that was based on the other marriages that I saw around me. So I kind of came in thinking, okay, this is my mum and dad, whatever he's like, I'm just going to have to take it, because that was the example that was given to me by my mum, which was, whatever happens, you just take it, you always uphold the respect. but despite coming in with that mindset, like, you do still notice the difference. You do still find it difficult. And when I came into my husband's family, I realized that there were lots of negative expectations because of the previous marriages that had happened in the family. They had where marriages had fallen apart because they'd married a girl from England. So I noticed that a lot of people treated me, kind of stepped away. And the reason why that had a big impact on me is because when you're in your own family, like your uncles, your aunties, they treat you like with a lot of love. And I almost felt like, you know, I'm one of the favorites. People really like me. And when I came into this new family, it was like, people don't like me and they don't even know me. Or I felt like they didn't like me and they don't even know me. And I found that really difficult. Is that I had some sort of reputation without these people even trying to get to know me. So I think that was difficult. But I agree with what all of you are saying as well, is over time, you build up and it becomes a mutual thing. So, you know, when I go out of my way, I will receive that as well. And I've been really fortunate that my in-laws and my husband are really lovely, which I wasn't expecting, because I was expecting the worst. And it is a give and take. But also, like Darshan Benji said, like, it was reassuring to me to know that my husband was on my side, which again was not something necessarily that other members of my family had, where the husband was willing to stand up for you and your rights. Well, not your rights, but kind of be considerate of what you needed. And I think it's constantly evolving. And as your role changes, I found my role, when I had children, I've always been a people pleaser, and I probably still am. But where I found when I had children, my priority became them, as opposed to necessarily always trying to please my in-laws. So sometimes that can cause a bit of friction as well. And I feel like it is about you always constantly setting boundaries, and people are having to adapt to that. Yeah, so it's a really big topic. I don't know how the future generations are adapting, or whether they're adapting to it or not. I know that makes me sound like I'm an old lady.
No.
My husband actually helped me to kind of see the whole dynamics of in-laws and your own parents in a really different light, when he said to me that you come into this family and you shouldn't be afraid to be yourself and to speak up in the same ways how you'd speak to your own family, because he says isn't there times when you have different opinions or disagreements with your own family, and you learn to get past those? And why can't you do that with your in-laws? Because if you never ever confront those situations, you're never going to get comfortable with them. And you know, that really struck a chord with me. I thought, you know what, that's very true actually. And I realized that when I did start to be myself and not do the whole people pleasing thing, which is, you know, exactly what you're saying, because that's how I felt as well. Like, I had to just please them and do everything that, you know, basically be this perfect daughter-in-law. And then I realized, no, do I not want to actually try and have a similar relationship like I have with my own family that I've lived with for so long? And it just kind of helped me see that from a different perspective, like not to be afraid and not to be fearful to kind of just confront certain things, and just to be yourself, not to try and sort of mask it.
One of the best pieces of advice I had was actually from one of my sister-in-laws, and she said, wherever you set the bar when you come in, that is basically what you would have to live up to. And I passed that on to my Viranias and my sister-in-laws, and I always said that to them is so one of you were talking about, you know, having to come home and change into a Punjabi suit, and I did that as well. And my mother-in-law didn't necessarily ask for it, but I saw my Bobby do it. But then when I stopped wearing them, it became an issue. But I had set that expectation myself, so obviously it was going to then cause disappointment. And then I passed that on to my sister-in-laws, and in the same kind of spirit is be you, do you. because then when you're people pleasing and you're setting these really high expectations, you know, obviously the other person's going to be upset when it appears to them like all of a sudden you've changed. And I feel like that's something that is going for the next generation, or is people are becoming much more in tune with who they are. They're less willing to people please and be the kind of docile daughter-in-law.